That's total. Actually, we're going to do our 13th, which is going to be a sit-up. But we've got a 3/4 of a mile walk to do to get my full 13 in, my full 2 miles. So what I did is I effectively got my endurance up. Obviously, you're going to start. It's not that you're losing muscle, but you're just not storing as much in particular muscle cells, fibrage, because you're not doing the resistance training. When you're walking, and even more so, long, slow distance walking, just like running, it makes your body more of an oxidizer, right? Which is fat adaptation in itself. That's kind of where science is getting to. And it gets harder as you get older, it's even harder to have that push effort and maximal push. And that ties in with creatine, phosphagen system, and everything. So I think if you really take advantage of that when you're young, you're going to be ahead, but you're also training with that in mind when you are young. Like volume, it used to be a mainstay. It used to be a thing to volume train. That was, you're lifting a certain amount. There's different ways of doing it, but you're lifting a certain amount of weight per workout. So even if you're just lifting an extra 10 pounds for a certain number of reps and you're just exhausted, you're always training to go over, over what your physiological shelf is. Can you change that? I believe that you can. And, I'm going to say, unfortunately, just as a sort of disclosure, but yeah, PEDs, they do something. They do. They do something good and they do something bad. But honestly, I didn't have any negative effects, and that's why I did them, is so that I could start training athletes, because I had already been training athletes, real athletes. Equinox Fitness, Club One, 24-hour fitness, Bailey's, if you remember Bailey's Total Fitness. I trained in Pasadena. The people that I trained with, Miss Venice Beach, people that I worked with, professional bodybuilders. One was on a circuit in Spain. I'm left with chest fat and a little bit of belly fat that I normally wouldn't have had, but the muscles are overall fuller for the light weight that I'm at. But that's all bullshit. Like physical things aren't the important things, right? Hello, mom, your mama, right? Is that what you mean? Yeah, I like that. I love those punny, toothy names. Love it. Good sense of humor. De-dollarization. Like, you have your localized sphere of events, and that's what eclipses, the world news, the world north, east, west, and south. That's what news stands for. But you have your global, you have your internal histories, you have your personal histories, you have the histories that see all of this in a paling sort of way. Oh, you were saying something? Say it in code if you want to say something sardonic. Put it through, man. I can handle it. You want to interact. You want to reach out. It's the important thing. Like young people, they'll say snide things, but I really think that they're trying to interact. And it's kind of a shit test, right? Once you get past that shit test, it's like, okay, I'm going to pass your shit test. Now we're friends, right? That's the way it used to be. Kids would come up when I was in middle school, and well, one kid that ended up being an adult, and I was a kind of an asshole to him. If he's on here still, Rhett, I apologize, man. The world is a very shady place, and I don't really trust anybody. But this goes out to all my high school friends, all the PG heads, as we used to call them, that have kept in touch with me, reached out to me, and I've kind of gone, I don't want to know you. I don't want to know anyone. It's not that I don't want to know you. It's that I want to release myself from the history of the past self, because the world, my own epicenter. So if you get into Lee Smolin, toe theories of everything, you look at the physicist's view of this, there's like this AB time, there's this thick time, it gets into spinners, it gets into all sorts of physics related postulations of like in our bodies, there's something called Zeitgebers. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but they're timekeepers. And it gets into the areas of nature, Cartesian, Descartes, Immanuel Kant, Rene Descartes, other philosophers like Schopenhauer, Voltaire, Heidegger. They all got into the postulations of reality and time, being in time, right? And people like Thomas Aquinas, John Locke, but really John Dee were very instrumental in the fact that could we put this into a diagram? And I believe that if you look at charting through energetics, you would be able to make out what you might call the monad or the tree of life, but you would see a charting system take place that was taking our idea of time into consideration, placing events, almost like a birthing chart, if you will, like a zodiac birthing chart, astrological birthing chart. And remember, astrology began long before the Zoroastrian movement, but the Magi, who very well may have been Zoroaster, that is, there was a young man named Sadi, probably he was Persian, but it's probably referencing back to Saudi Arabia and the underpinnings to that. But this is 3,500 years ago plus. And if you ever get your hands on a book, the Zoroaster, I used to have it. I gave it to my son. And I found it on Amazon after going down into Mountain View and finding that and some other Masonic texts and studying that for a while. Morals and dogma, really getting into the intricacies of morals and dogma. Not only wanting to understand and having the curiosity, but having phenomenology occur in my life where I had no choice but to understand. Like, you've got to know what the fuck's going on here. And I already seem weird enough walking in a room in the dark. I understand that. I'm just coming off of 4.5 months of GIT training. Gradual intensity training is what I call it, continuous training. And I'm parlaying that endurance now into everyday resistance training, right? Yeah, for some reason, did you retract it, or do I have a filter on? Because I don't like to be put down like anyone, but I like people's renditions of the truth. And it's like, if somebody has something rude to say, I'm not the type of person who's so skittish that I'm going to block it out. I got a chipped tooth, missing teeth, and I'm old, I'm fat. I mean, you could put me down in 50,000 ways and it's good for me. I'm not self-deprecating, but I believe that that's something that's missing in our society that makes us better. You know, like that was, I hadn't really gotten any respect built up for David Goggins until I heard. You got to understand that I didn't even know who these people were until last year. Even Mr. Beast, I didn't follow any mainstream stuff. Although I was online, I would post things. I wouldn't subscribe to or adhere to anything that was considered mainstream. So all of a sudden, I was flooded with this inundation of information, and mainly there's a huge loss of oral tradition information that typically was passed down from generation to generation. Hello, Garrett. How's it going? And that's missing, and that's what you're doing here on this weird podcast, or this live stream. That's why I'm recognizing you, because we are trying to share information through oral tradition. And the only way that we can do that is through the cybernetic program, right? So this is cybernetics, right? And you are, in turn, a cyborg. Once you're, like Elon Musk said something that alluded to this years ago, and it stuck with me. But the truth is the consciousness that we're exchanging that involves this technology, the communication wouldn't occur without the technology, without the interface, without it giving us, you could almost look at it as Metcalfe's law, or even the Fibonacci sequence. It's giving us a numeric value, a code value by which we can communicate. It's kind of like what I was just talking about with Lee Smolin, thick time, different ideas or concepts of conceptual time. What I don't understand is why people bang their heads over time as like Lee Smolin. He seems like, so if you don't know who this is, you could go on Theories of Everything and look at an interview that Kurt Jamungal released in the past few days. And Lee Smolin is a physicist, and it almost looks like they're in the Bay Area, but I could be wrong. But it looks like one of those Bay Area Victorians. In fact, I would almost say that it looks like he's near the upper part of Golden Gate Park. I just know the lighting. I know the Victorians. I live kind of nearby there, in the South Bay, let's say. So it looks like that, but there's plenty of Victorians all over the place. But you can tell things like that, is my point. Like you can see a certain amount of dryness, you know, in the way that the light is refracting. You can almost smell, like in this room, you can see that it's damp. You can see that there's like mildew in the bathroom. There's just certain things that we're aware of, and it could be termed precognition, but that would be too far. So it's metacognition. It's about thought and mind. And so you're aware of more than you think. And that's getting into Sean Ryan's interview, right? Interviews with Joe McMoneagle, right? And Colonel Alexander. Those are a couple of his most recent interviews. And then if you want to look up Eric Hecker and some other people, you'll see that once we don't consider the psychical phenomenon of telepathy and certain abilities like that as liminal, right? It scares us, right? Hello, River. It scares us because once we unlock it, there's an awareness in us that I think is multi-generational, and certain people react to this differently. Like when you talk about witches, I know people, I've worked with people who, oh, you talking about witches, I'm the other way, you know, you're talking about this, I'm out, you know, because just thinking it, a phenomenon begins to occur, while others are more, they're less sensitive to it, less prefabricated to this experience of phenomenology, right? And for me, I never was aware of that, so I started to do these mental mind applications. And once I went into the mentalism of it, that is when I believe, if you are aware of telomeres, it's basically like the caps on the ends of your DNA. But you have to ask yourself, where does the DNA end? If you're looking at an electromagnetic force and you think that the EM force is done, right? And then you get into strong, weak nuclear forces, the force keeps going on, and there's a transitory or a transitional stage, right? So it's kind of like you're connected to it all the time. You are just unaware of yourself, and you're made to be unaware of yourself on purpose as part of the on-running program, right? So once you open that awareness up, there's no shrinking back. You can't just decide, oh, I want to close this door. And that's why the windows, right? The doors, pathways, stargates, that's what this is all about. Is once you open your awareness up to it, you're open in this life. It's like you've acquired a skill. It's like Pokemon, you know. I had kids that were really into Pokemon. I used to go to all the like competitions with them and stuff. I tried to teach them how to save things. I bought them a bunch of those Tintin, you know, they would be like over 20 years old now. And I'm like, if you hang on to these and learn how to hang on to them and keep them in good shape, this is money right here. But we don't think that way. But rich people do. So you get into the Rothschilds, right? You get into the Rockefellers. You get into the origins of that. And if you want to go into that more, yeah, you can look at Billy Carson. He's a new name. You can go back to David Icke or Jordan Maxwell, Michael Tsarian. A lot of what's happened is, and I think that would be like my only service, is to say, hey, I've been interested in this. I've studied this. You know, I remember when the alien autopsy was out on television, watching that, and then seeing it debunked, right? I've seen things